Hello everyone. We are going to discuss the form of the poem Thoughts in a Garden by Andrew Marvell. As we know by now that in this poem Andrew Marvell tries to convey that the source of true and complete physical, mental as well as spiritual satisfaction lies in the garden. We know that the poem is metaphysical. It is romantic and classical also. It has all the elements of these three types of poems. It is divided into 9 stanzas. Each stanza has 4 rhymed couplets of iambic pentameter. We will first discuss the metaphysical elements in the poem. The poem uses conceits. It uses wit, also far-fetched images, as well as allusions, and also a dramatic situation. There is a balance of emotion and intellect in this poem, which is also a feature of metaphysical poems. The romantic myths about God Apollo and God Pan, both of them who are shown to be running after or physical beauty of nymphs or women. But their search for love ends in trees or in nature. Then there is the biblical allusion of Adam's lonely happiness. Here, the heterogeneous ideas are yoked together by violence within the context of the argument. So, this is another feature of the metaphysical poems. The trees and peace of the garden are also personified and even sexualized here. The argument about physical pleasure is changed into the argument about mental pleasure. Here, the poet brings out a truly metaphysical idea about the mind. He writes that according to medieval philosophy, mind is an ocean of all the things and images of the real world. He further extends the idea of happiness and pleasurable experience by arguing that his pleasure is actually spiritual. Then he creates the imagery of his soul which is flying like a bird and preparing for the eternal flight to salvation. Again, he relates this idea of spiritual pleasure to the comparison with Adam in paradise or Garden of Eden. The last stanza also he puts a metaphysical element, and that is the idea of the garden as a separate sundial. The garden is also has also dramatic and emotional elements in it, which are balanced by the author with witty and intellectual ideas as well as allusions. This unified sensibility also gives the poem or adds to the poem another element of metaphysical poetry. Now we will look at the poem The Garden, Thoughts in a Garden as a classical poem. The poem shows qualities like the use of different poetic diction. It also uses heroic couplets, rhythm and design, classical and educated allusions. There are many difficult words also in the poem, and ordinary words are used in unusual sense. Like in the first line, amaze word is used in the meaning to convey the meaning perplex or to confuse. Many sentences have Latin like word order with the verb at the end. There is also a classical perfection in its meter and design and structure of the poem as a whole. Now, the main theme of the poem is that garden offers a very peaceful life and which is more satisfying than social life and human company. The poem has a number of witty ideas and sensuous images and a balance between romantic and classical elements. It is filled with metaphysical elements too. So, in short, we can say that the speaker criticizes men who vainly amaze themselves or uselessly amaze themselves, perplex themselves by putting a garland of few leaves and believing that they have achieved highest honor or prestige and reward. And for achieving this reward, they work very hard, endlessly. But according to the author, the true and complete pleasure of life lies in the complete garland of repose, that is, in nature. Now, in the second stanza, the poet personifies quietness and innocence in nature, and he says that he has at last found innocence and quietness in nature, which he tried to seek in the company of men in the society. Then he says that the trees are amorous, that is, sexually playful or powerful. He expresses such odd emotions and attachment with trees that he even criticizes lovers for cutting trees to write the name of their beloveds, and they engrave the names of their beloveds. In the fourth stanza, he claims that when men's heart of love and youth comes to an end, men turn to nature. And he says that even the gods did this when, for example, God Apollo and God Pan changed their lovers into trees. In the second part of the poem, that is from stanza 3 to 7, the poet says that he gives a very sensuous description about physical pleasures in a garden. In the sixth stanza, he goes from this physical pleasure to mental pleasures in a garden. And he uses a very odd metaphysical philosophical idea that the mind contains another world and a garden is there inside it too. In the seventh stanza, he further claims that the pleasure in the garden has a spiritual aspect too, and his spirit glides in the garden. He romanticizes his feelings and he says that his soul is singing and gliding from branches of one tree to the other tree. He also says that his soul is combing its feathers and preparing for the eternal flight to salvation. Here also he gives an allusion to the Holy Spirit of the Bible. In the third and last part of the poem, that is stanza 8 and 9, before making any conclusive remark, that there can be no question of genuine pleasure without nature. The speaker compares himself with lonely Adam in Eden. He also argues that being alone was is like a second paradise, is also another heavenly state for Adam before Eve was created and she brought about his fall. In the ninth stanza, he thanks God for creating a unique world of its own, that is, the garden. And he says that nature has its own time, and that time is fixed. The rush and hurry of the society has no connection with the garden. The sun has its own sweet course. So, the garden is the only source of true physical, mental, as well as spiritual satisfaction.